Tinubu has personally visited 33 countries since becoming president. He's signed bilateral agreements in France, he's shaken hands in China, he's taken meetings in South Africa, India, Germany, Brazil. The man has been everywhere. But here is what nobody is putting together. While he was touring the world, signing deals, making promises, projecting Nigeria's image, the embassies back behind him were empty. No ambassador, no envoy, nobody to follow up, nobody to make sure Nigeria actually gets what was promised. And now, over 2 years later, he is finally trying to send ambassadors. And some countries, they are saying no, or at the very least, not yet. So the question I want you to stay with throughout this video is this: did Tinubu accidentally destroy Nigeria's diplomatic leverage, or was this neglect calculated? Because the answer changes everything. Before we go deeper, if you're just finding Nigeria newsfeed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics without the noise, without the spin. Hit subscribe and stay with me, because this one gets interesting. Let's go back to the beginning, September 2023. Tinubu had been in office for barely 4 months. He'd already removed the fuel subsidy on day one, he'd floated the naira, Nigeria was in economic shock, and then quietly, almost under the radar, his Foreign Affairs Ministry sent out letters to every single Nigerian ambassador around the world. Career diplomat, political appointee, didn't matter. Everyone was being recalled. Go home. The government's stated reason was a careful study of the state of affairs at Nigerian missions globally, with a commitment to bringing world-class efficiency and quality to foreign and domestic service delivery. Now, recalling ambassadors when a new government comes in, that part is fairly standard practice. You bring in new people aligned with your agenda. Fine. The problem, 1 year and 10 months later, he had failed to name replacements for those asked to step aside. Nigeria has 109 diplomatic missions in total, 76 embassies, 22 high commissions, and 11 consulates, all affected by this disruption. These entities have been overseen by consuls general and chargé d'affaires, who are administrative officers whose offices do not carry the weight or authority as full ambassadors when engaging host nations at the highest levels. Then, November 2025, more than 26 months after the recall, Tinubu began sending names to the Senate for confirmation. On November 26, 2025, the first batch of 3 nominees was forwarded to the National Assembly. 3 days later, the president submitted an additional 32 names, 17 non-career diplomats and 15 career officers. That's when the second problem hit, and it's worse than the first. To understand why this matters legally and structurally, you need to know how Nigerian diplomacy actually works. Under Nigeria's Constitution and the Foreign Affairs Act, the president has the exclusive power to appoint ambassadors, but that appointment requires Senate confirmation. It's not a rubber stamp. The Senate has to screen nominees, and that takes time. But there's another layer that most people don't talk about, and this is where things get complicated. Before a Nigerian ambassador can even resume duty in a foreign country, that country has to formally agree to accept them. This is called agrément. It's a diplomatic protocol under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. The agrément process can be between 6 and 8 months. For African countries, it may be as short as 2 months, but the receiving state will ask their own security agencies to carry out thorough screening because ambassadors enjoy diplomatic immunity. So the pipeline looks like this. The president submits names, Senate screens and confirms, Ministry of Foreign Affairs writes to receiving countries requesting agrément, receiving country investigates the nominee. If approved, the ambassador travels and resumes duty. Even in the best case scenario, you are looking at months from nomination to deployment. Now, here's the gray area being exploited. Nigerian missions have since been led by chargés d'affaires, who are career civil servants. Legally, these missions are still operating. There's no constitutional crisis. But practically, a chargé d'affaires is a level 12 officer. They cannot relate with presidents. They cannot see any officer higher than a director in any diplomatic gathering. The government has been hiding behind technicalities, while Nigeria's real diplomatic reach has quietly collapsed. Record on this issue. Obi, during his campaigns, was careful, strategically careful, about how he addressed Sharia. He spoke consistently about the rule of law, constitutional governance, and one Nigeria under one legal framework. But he never, in any major speech or interview, said the words, "I will abolish Sharia criminal law in the North." Why not? Is it cowardice? Is it pragmatism? Or is it something more calculated? Let's think about it the way a strategist would. Who benefits from the status quo? First, northern political elites, the emirs, the governors, the senators from those 12 states. Sharia is not just a religious system for them. It's a political identity tool. It signals to their base, we protect Islamic values here. It's a mobilization mechanism. A governor who defends Sharia gets votes. A governor who questions it gets primary challenges. Second, the Nigerian political establishment as a whole. Every president since Obasanjo has found that Sharia is a useful pressure valve. If the North is agitated about something else, fuel subsidy removal, federal appointments, military operations against banditry, what do? You don't touch Sharia. You let it sit there. It keeps setting elites on side. Third, external religious networks. There are documented connections between some Nigerian Sharia advocacy groups and Gulf-based Islamic charitable organizations. This is not conspiracy. This is fundraising reality. Those financial flows give certain actors an interest in keeping the legal framework alive. Who stands to lose? First, non-Muslim minorities in the 12 states, Christians, animists, and others in places like Kaduna, Bauchi, and Niger State live under a legal framework that technically doesn't apply to them, but in practice bleeds into their daily lives through enforcement culture, social pressure, and the absence of neutral civic institutions. Second, northern women. Sharia criminal codes in their current application have been used disproportionately against women. The famous cases, Safia Husseini, Amina Lawal, where women were sentenced to death by stoning for adultery, these cases became international stories. Both sentences were eventually overturned, but the legal architecture that produced those sentences still exists. Third, northern reformers and progressives. There is a significant and often overlooked constituency in northern Nigeria, educated, urbanized Muslims who are deeply uncomfortable with criminal Sharia and want modernization. These people exist, they vote, but they are politically outgunned by the religious establishment. The Obi calculation. What are his actual options? If Peter Obi becomes president, he has 4 realistic paths. Path 1. The constitutional challenge route. Direct the Attorney General to file a formal Supreme Court challenge to Sharia criminal codes as unconstitutional under Section 10. This is the cleanest legal route. It's also the most politically explosive. The North would read it as a declaration of war. His administration would be consumed by the conflict from day one. He would lose any chance of a governing coalition. Path 2. The Federalism Plus approach. Don't touch Sharia directly. Instead, strengthen federal institutions, the courts, the police, civil registries, in a way that gradually makes the parallel Sharia system less powerful. Fund legal aid organizations, appoint reformist judges, play the long game. This is quiet, structural, and doesn't make headlines. It's also what people mean when they say institutional reform. Obi's Labour Party platform leans closer to this than anything else. Path 3. The National Dialogue Route. Convene a national constitutional conference, something Nigerians have been calling for since the 1990s, and put every contentious issue on the table, including Sharia. Let Nigerians negotiate a new social contract, kick the decision to a legitimate representative process. Smart, but risky. Constitutional conferences in Nigeria have a history of producing reports that gather dust, and a president can be seen as weak for outsourcing the decision. Path 4. Strategic silence.
Don't address it at all. Focus on the economy, security, and anti-corruption. Govern effectively in ways that don't require confronting Sharia head-on. Hope that economic progress makes the issue less politically charged over time. This is essentially what every president has done. And here's the uncomfortable truth. It has partially worked in the sense that Sharia has not caused a formal constitutional crisis, but it has also allowed the situation to calcify. I'm going to come back to something before the end of this video, because there's a scenario that almost nobody is talking about, where Sharia actually becomes less politically important, not because anyone abolishes it, but because of something entirely different. Stay with me. Now, if what I just laid out surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know your take before we get to the part that changes the whole picture. Let's zoom out. What does this mean for Nigeria as a whole? The federal-state power balance. Nigeria's current structure gives enormous autonomy to states. This is a legacy of the military era and the compromises of 1999. A president who moves aggressively on Sharia isn't just fighting religion, he's fighting the entire logic of Nigerian federalism as it has been practiced. If an Obi administration successfully challenges Sharia through the courts, it sets a precedent. The federal government can intervene in state legal structures. That precedent terrifies every governor, not just northern ones. Southern governors with their own legal irregularities and constitutional gray areas would also feel threatened. Economic consequences. Investment in the 12 Sharia states is already complicated by perceptions of instability and legal unpredictability. International businesses, especially in financial services, hospitality, and consumer goods, apply informal caution. A protracted federal-state legal battle over Sharia would deepen that uncertainty and likely slow investment in the north for years. Ironically, an Obi administration that doesn't tackle Sharia but successfully grows the economy may do more to secularize northern public life than any legal challenge. As northern youth employment improves, as education rates rise, as urbanization accelerates, the political demand for criminal Sharia tends to decrease. Economic development is the long-term solvent. Interfaith and inter-ethnic relations. Nigeria has experienced some of its worst interfaith violence in the Sharia states, particularly Kaduna, which has seen repeated cycles of Muslim-Christian communal violence. The Sharia question is not just abstract law, it is woven into land disputes, residency rights, business licensing, and access to justice in ways that affect daily life. An Obi presidency that is seen as hostile to Islam would almost certainly accelerate tension in those flashpoint areas. An Obi presidency that is seen as governing fairly, appointing northerners, investing in northern infrastructure, taking security seriously, could potentially reduce tension even without touching the legal codes. In 2002, Obasanjo reportedly told a northern governor privately, "If I challenge Sharia in court, the north burns." That calculation, right or wrong, has shaped every president since. Obi would inherit the same calculation.
Is one of the tools in the presidential toolkit. The United States and UK. Both the US State Department and the UK Foreign Office have flagged Nigeria's religious freedom situation in annual reports for over 2 decades. Nigeria has been listed on the US Commission on International Religious Freedom's watch list. This creates a diplomatic lever. American and British governments can apply quiet pressure, particularly on issues affecting Christian minorities in the north. However, and this is important, neither the US nor UK has ever made Sharia reform a condition of military aid, trade agreements, or diplomatic engagement with Nigeria. Oil, security cooperation against Boko Haram, and counter-terrorism have always outweighed religious freedom concerns in the hierarchy of Western interests. An Obi administration that wanted international support for reform would find sympathetic ears, but no cavalry. The OIC factor. Nigeria is a member of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which itself is politically contentious in Nigeria since it was joined by a military government without full national debate. Any Ubi move against Sharia would be framed by opponents not just as anti-Northern, but as anti-Muslim at the global level. The OIC membership gives Northern advocates an international platform to frame the issue. What diaspora Nigerians should know. Many Nigerians in the UK and US have a simplified view of this issue. Either Sharia is barbaric, Obi should abolish it, or Sharia is a religious right, leave it alone. The reality is far more layered. The question is not whether Sharia should exist as a personal religious practice. That's not in dispute. The question is whether a criminal justice system with corporal punishment can coexist with constitutional democracy and the rule of law. That's a governance question, not a religious one. Let's deal with the things people get wrong. Misconception number 1. Obi is too Christian to handle this fairly. This is lazy analysis. Obi's actual record as Anambra governor was notably free of ethno-religious bias in appointment and governance. His running mate in 2023 was Yusuf Datti Baba Ahmed, a northern Muslim. The ticket was deliberately constructed to signal cross-regional governance. Dismissing Obi's capacity on religious grounds without examining his record is the same intellectual laziness that has kept Nigeria's political conversation shallow. Misconception number 2. Sharia is just a northern Muslim issue. It doesn't affect everyone. Wrong. Nigeria's inability to unify its legal framework is a direct drag on investment, on federal cohesion, and on the country's international reputation. When businesses assess Nigeria risk, legal fragmentation is a line item. When the military struggles to operate across states with different legal cultures, that has security implications. This is a national governance issue dressed in religious clothing. Misconception number 3. The best approach is a direct constitutional challenge. Just take it to court. The strongest counter-argument here is practical, not ideological. Nigeria's Supreme Court is not insulated from political pressure. A case challenging Sharia criminal codes would take years. It would consume enormous political capital, and there's genuine constitutional ambiguity, as we discussed earlier, that means the outcome is not guaranteed. You could win the battle and lose the war if the North responds by further entrenching parallel institutions outside formal legal structures. The strongest opposing argument. The most intellectually serious argument for leaving Sharia alone is this. In a genuinely federal system, states should have the right to govern according to the values of their populations. Northern Muslims did not ask to be part of a country with a secular legal tradition. They were amalgamated into Nigeria by British colonial fiat in 1914. Demanding that they abandon a legal system rooted in their religious identity is, from this view, a form of continued cultural imposition. Where does that argument fall apart? It falls apart when the system is applied to non-Muslims. It falls apart when it is used to oppress women within Muslim communities in ways those women themselves reject. And it falls apart when it is used by political elites to deflect accountability, hiding behind religious identity to avoid the question of why northern states, with Sharia in place for 25 years, remain the poorest and least developed in the country. Here's the irony nobody talks about. In several Sharia states, the governors who most loudly defend Islamic law have been convicted of or credibly accused of massive financial corruption. Sharia prescribes harsh penalties for theft, but the politicians looting state treasuries are not the ones getting their hands cut off.